Safety is the responsibility of everyone who works at Escanaba. It is a shared responsibility that applies not only when we are on the job, but throughout our day. This program only provides general information and does not relieve your employer of specific training responsibilities. Over the years, our mill has invested a lot in making Escanaba a safe place to work. A lot of these changes have been the result of ideas generated by our workforce. Over the past few years, the mill has made great strides in reducing the number of workplace injuries. Again, this was the result of a lot of effort put forth by a number of employees. However, there is still a lot of work to be done. To assure that each of us goes home healthy at the end of the day, we need to improve our safety performance. To make those improvements, it will take a commitment from each and every one of us. That commitment is to take personal accountability for our safety and the safety of our coworkers. What does this include? It includes taking the time to make sure that what you are about to do is safe. It means abiding by the policies and program requirements that have been put in place to protect your safety. This training course is developed as a means to communicate the key elements of our safety programs and policies. It is intended to provide a summary of what is required of each of us in the area of safety. Our company is committed to improving safety. However, to achieve our goal, it takes the commitment of each of us. Please join in our efforts to make Escanaba the company leader in safety. Thank you in advance for your efforts. Verso Corporation is committed to protecting human health and the environment, and to utilizing resources in a responsible and sustainable manner. This commitment applies to each employee, our contractors and visitors, and to the communities in which we operate. We, as employees of the Escanaba Mill, demonstrate this commitment by accepting personal responsibility for working safely and operating the mill in a manner that minimizes its impact on the environment and our neighbors. In order to accomplish this, our daily activities are guided by a set of core values and beliefs. We believe that we are responsible for our own safety and the safety of our coworkers, visitors, and contractors. All accidents are preventable. Putting ourselves or others at risk is a violation of trust. The mill can be operated in a manner that minimizes its impact on the environment. To meet our commitments, we will comply with all safety, health, and environmental regulations and policies, going beyond the letter of the law when necessary to protect human health and the environment. Create a workplace free of occupational injuries and illness by eliminating unsafe conditions and behaviors that threaten our safety. Work to eliminate the potential for environmental incidents and minimize their potential impacts. Minimize the impact of the mill's operation on the environment and our neighbors by incorporating pollution prevention into mill operations and long-term facility planning. Integrate safety, health, and environmental strategies into our daily operating decisions and long-term business plans. Communicate openly and honestly with our employees, contractors, customers, neighbors, and other stakeholders on all safety, health, and environmental issues or concerns. The mill property has 2 access gates. They are located at the front and back of the facility. 2 parking lots accommodate vehicles. One is located along the river at the front of the mill. This lot is to be used by vendors and visitors entering the front gate. The other is reached by entering the back gate. This is to be used by prime, construction, and other contractors working on capital projects, repairs, or outage-related work. No other on-site parking of personal vehicles is permitted. If you enter the back gate, you must either brass in at one of the mill's brassing stations or check in at the construction office. You must brass in and out whenever you leave or enter the mill site. If you enter through the front gate, you must sign in at the front gate. At that time, you will be issued the appropriate colored pass. You must sign in and out whenever you enter or leave the mill site. The speed limit is 15 miles per hour except where specifically posted. Seat belts must be worn when operating vehicles on the mill site. Don't ride in a vehicle unless you are in a seat. Riding in the box of a pickup truck is prohibited. Do not cross railroad tracks when the lights are flashing. Park all vehicles at least 8 feet clear of the railroad tracks. Some intersections or pedestrian crossings have warning signs or reduced speed limits. The five-way intersection by the wood pad is particularly hazardous due to heavy equipment traffic and winter road conditions. The log decks and chip pads in the woodyard are considered off-limits to normal pedestrian and vehicle traffic. If your work requires you to enter one of these areas, approval must be obtained from the woodyard control room. When walking inside the mill, always be aware of lift trucks, pedestrians, and tricycles. Pedestrians inside and outside of the mill buildings should stop at all intersections and use available walkways. Security may inspect your vehicle anytime you leave the mill site. Removal of Verso tools or materials from the mill site without a materials pass constitutes grounds for banishment from the mill site or prosecution. All contracting companies are responsible for their own employees, including compliance with all OSHA and MyOSHA regulations and all Verso health and safety policies. Contracting companies must also supply their employees with all tools, personal protection equipment, and safety training. When working around moving or electrical equipment, hair length cannot be worn below the collar except when passing through the area. Anything below the collar must be contained, under a cap, tucked in a shirt, etc. Avoid wearing gloves and other jewelry when working with or near moving equipment or electrical equipment. Rings and watches that do not break away are prohibited. All safety devices such as guards, barriers, etc., which must be removed to perform necessary work, must be replaced immediately upon completion of that work. Use or maintain machines and equipment only when authorized. No safety precautions before starting. High-pressure compressed air should be used only on designated jobs. Never use high-pressure compressed air to blow off clothing. Any employee operating forklift trucks and/or heavy equipment shall be trained on the equipment. All normal routes of egress and all exits must be kept clear of all obstructions. When using ladders, make sure they are in good repair and set sturdily. Avoid stretching. Take the time to move the ladder. Never stand on the top step of a stepladder. Use proper lifting techniques. Bend your knees, grasp the load firmly, and then raise the load, keeping your back as straight as possible. Obtain help to lift heavy loads. All contractors shall maintain their work areas in a clean, uncluttered manner, free of trip, slip, or fall hazards. No alcoholic beverages or illegal drugs are to be brought onto company property. No individual is allowed to report to work while under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Alcohol and drugs are not to be consumed before reporting for work at the mill or at any time during the work shift. Any contractor employee can be tested randomly, or if they appear to be under the influence of drugs or alcohol, or if they are involved in an accident. Pre-employment testing may be performed, and Verso reserves the right to search personal property for any suspected drugs. Firearms are not permitted on the Escanaba Mill site. Posted load capacities must never be exceeded when transporting products or supplies in the various elevators located throughout the mill. Do not damage the inside gates or any other parts of the elevators when placing products inside elevators. Neither forklift nor clamp trucks may be used to raise or lower, or open or close elevator doors. In the event of elevator failures while people are on board, loss prevention officers at the front gate may be reached by using the Direct Connect telephones located in the elevators. Loss prevention officers will initiate response activities for the situation. Verso fire extinguishers are typically located throughout the mill on columns and outside walls. Contractors are required to supply their own fire extinguishers. Job sites will be inspected for extinguisher availability. Prior to arriving on site, you must know the various classes of fires. A. Ordinary combustibles. B. Flammable liquids. C. Energized electrical. And D. Combustible metals. You must also know appropriate usage of each variety of extinguisher, including pressurized water, carbon dioxide, and dry chemical extinguishers. Because Class D fires are handled by the mill's emergency response team, the mill has no portable extinguishers for Class D fires. If you use a Verso extinguisher, do not hang it back up. Lay it on its side. Call the loss prevention officer at extension 2676 and provide the location of the discharged extinguisher. From a cell phone, dial 906-233-2676. Housekeeping is everyone's responsibility at Escanaba. Poor housekeeping is a major cause of accidents and fires. Good housekeeping is emphasized as a vital safety measure and required in all areas of the mill. Floors, stairways, aisles, and steps must be kept free from slipping hazards, such as hoses, extension cords, oil, water, grease, inks, tools, scrap paper, and rags. Aisles must be kept clear for safe travel at all times. Firefighting equipment, fire doors, fire exits, eye wash stations, and safety showers should be readily accessible. We separate and recycle trash as much as possible. Labeled hoppers are located throughout the mill. Place discarded materials in their proper bins. Plastic contamination causes lost production. Plastic products, including foam cups, tie wraps, tape, and plastic sheeting, are all problematic. If you notice plastic materials lying around, place them in the proper container. Plastic that gets into the system contaminates large portions of the raw paper stock. Particular areas of concern are the chip piles, the third floor of the kraft mill, and the broke baskets located throughout the mill. This paper is recycled back into the system. These are not garbage bins, so do not throw any other materials into them. All contractors, vendors, and visitors will comply with this policy and wear the appropriate PPE required for their specific work and/or areas. All personal protective equipment must comply with Escanaba Mill policy. Unless work is being done in these areas, PPE is not needed in offices, office buildings, control rooms, locker rooms, conference rooms, restrooms, and designated break areas. Contracting companies must provide their own personal protection equipment. 100% all-natural fiber long-sleeve shirts and pants must be worn before entering any MCC. Contractors, vendors, and visitors are required to wear safety eyeglasses with side shields on the mill site. The requirement applies starting at the front gate to the mill site and upon entering the mill property at the back gate. Approved cutting goggles must be worn when using torches. This applies to cutting, soldering, welding, and burning operations. Welders are required to wear welding hoods and safety eyeglasses. Safety glasses and face shields are to be worn when using high-pressure cleaners, steam cleaners, rotting spouts and ports, and either portable or stationary grinders. Workers handling chemicals are to wear face shields, chemical goggles, and/or safety eyeglasses. All contractors, vendors, and visitors are required to wear hard hats in all areas of the mill except offices, office buildings, control rooms, locker rooms, conference rooms, restrooms, and designated break areas. If work is being done in these areas, hard hats are required. Department safety procedures and job-specific tasks may have additional head protection requirements. The following safety gloves should be worn for hand protection. Kevlar gloves should be worn when handling sharps, such as knives, doctor blades, slitter blades, and sheet metal. Nitrile or neoprene gloves should be worn when handling or working with chemicals such as biocides, degreasers, cleaners, acids, caustic, and white, green, and black liquors. Goatskin or leather work gloves should be worn when conducting general work during which abrasions and minor cuts may occur. It is required that all contractors, vendors, and visitors wear steel-toed shoes while in the mill work areas. Contractors, vendors, and visitors must wear hearing protection devices, such as earplugs and earmuffs, throughout the mill operating areas except office areas, control rooms, lunchrooms, restrooms, break areas, and locker rooms. In the kraft mill and utilities areas, contractors, vendors, and visitors must carry escape mouthbit respirators or have them immediately available. Use of dust masks is encouraged when performing jobs that involve nuisance dust levels. Examples are woodworking, cleanup jobs involving air movement, and sweeping. Fall protection should be provided for any employee working more than 4 feet above the floor or ground. Fall protection may include properly installed nets, substantial handrails, and properly tying off with approved full-body safety harnesses. Each person using a full-body safety harness must select an anchor point. Designed anchor points must have ratings of 5,400 pounds per person. Workers may not anchor to cable trays, chemical lines, or conduit. They are advised to try to select fixed machine components, such as steel loops and beams. A confined space is an enclosed area that has the 3 following characteristics. Its primary function is something other than human occupancy. It has restricted means of entry and exit, and it is large enough and so configured that an employee may bodily enter and perform assigned work. Before a permit-required confined space can be entered, it must be removed from service, isolated and protected from the release of energy or the introduction of potentially hazardous materials or chemicals into the space. Isolation and protection includes closing and locking valves, opening drains or vents, blanking or blinding, misaligning or removing sections of lines, pipes, or ducts, double blocking and bleeding the system, locking out all energy sources. Confined spaces shall be cleaned of hazardous materials and/or decontaminated to the extent feasible before entry. Workers should check with area supervision for required procedures for specific equipment. If a space has a top entry or an entry located more than 5 feet above either the inside or outside of the working surface, or both, retrieval rescue equipment, including a tripod and rescue winch, must be in place before an entry can take place. Prior to entering a confined space, all affected workers shall participate in a pre-entry huddle to discuss potential hazards, emergencies, operational procedures, and any other relevant topics. Prior to entering permit-required confined spaces, or PRCSs, entrants must have some means of communicating with attendants for contact and emergency purposes. Acceptable means are two-way radios, hand signals, provided line of sight can be maintained at all times, voice, which is not an option if hearing protection is required, and tether lines. Contractors are responsible for providing their own attendance. Continuous air monitoring must be conducted during all confined space entries. Ventilation of tanks is required if initial atmospheric test readings are above 2 for carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, and flammable vapors. Ventilation may also be necessary depending upon the concerns raised by teams during pre-entry huddles. Any changes in the space that introduce new hazards to it require immediate reevaluation of the space before entry. Body harnesses, lifelines, and rescue equipment are required for all permit-required confined spaces, unless the equipment will create additional hazards for the entrance. The safety department must review the spaces before this requirement is waived. The authorized attendant must have a means of summoning emergency assistance that is immediately available at the entrance to the confined space. Acceptable means include telephones, two-way radios, or workers who can go and obtain assistance. Authorized attendants may never leave their posts for any reason, as long as people are in confined spaces. Before anyone is allowed into confined spaces, authorized attendants are responsible for determining if entry conditions are acceptable, completing all entry documentation, and signing under pre-entry sign-off on the confined space entry permits. Hot work is any temporary operation involving open flames or the production of heat and/or sparks. These operations are normally related to maintenance work during which grinding, welding, or torch cutting is being conducted. Hot work is not limited to just these tasks. It may also include tasks such as brazing, soldering, thermal resistance heating, metallizing, computer-aided design welding or cutting, or torch-applied roofing. Hot work permit policy. The form includes the following information: permit duration, date, and times, name of the company by which those doing work are employed, descriptions of the locations where the work is to take place, including building names, floors, and column numbers, type of work to be done, such as cutting or welding, a checklist of precautions to be taken as they pertain to the job, the names of the personnel doing the work, the name of their supervisor, and the signature of the area production supervisor. Once a permit has been filled out and the area production supervisor has signed the permit, a call must be made to the front gate loss prevention officer at extension 2676 to obtain a permit number for the job. Only after this number has been obtained can actual hot work be performed. When the hot work has been completed, the person serving in the role of fire watch must remain at the job site for at least 30 minutes to monitor the area and watch for fires that may occur as a result of the work that was conducted. High hazard locations must have fire watch for 60 minutes. This includes bark system, chip screen building, wood room, PS&D, and all machine dryer sections. At the end of the observation period, the fire watch must sign his or her name and enter the time on the bottom of the permit. The completed hot work permit must then be given to the loss prevention department at the front gate or deposited in one of the hot work permit drop boxes. The Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Agency, or MIOSHA, have mandated that employers ensure that employees are not exposed to the unexpected energization of machines or equipment or the release of stored energy that could cause injury. Each area of the mill has developed specific lockout procedures for isolating equipment. All contractors are required to comply with the restrictions and limitations imposed upon them during lockouts. Contractors are required to perform lockouts in accordance with all aspects of the Escanaba Mill's lockout policy. For multiple lockouts, each person must place and remove their own personal lock on all isolation devices and lock boxes. Contractors are not permitted to execute multiple lockouts. A contractor's representative will have the opportunity to walk down a lockout with an operations representative to validate the lockout. If you fail to remove your personal lock at the end of a shift, your supervisor cannot remove that lock without either a key release procedure or your return to the job site for a proper removal. Pay strict attention to any deviation tag on the lockbox. A deviation tag means some piece of equipment is not locked out. Look at the lockout sheet and consult your supervisor. Only approved electrical contractors can throw breakers or enter MCC rooms unescorted. Contractors are reminded: clear, try, off. Clear the area of all personnel. Try to start or activate the equipment. Return the button or control to the off position. They are also reminded: never put another person's lock on a lockout. Never remove another person's lock from a lockout. Never work under another person's lock. Always be sure your crew lock is on the lockout. Contractor crew supervisors must follow the key release procedure in the lockout policy whenever a personal lock of a contractor crew member has left the facility. Loss prevention officers at the front gate implement the key release procedure. Personnel must be wearing 100% natural fiber clothing, long-sleeve shirts, socks, undergarments, and long pants. Silk screening will not be permitted. Exception: an incidental amount of elastic used in non-melting fabric underwear or socks shall be permitted. Personnel must also be wearing safety glasses and hearing protection. Failure to follow these procedures will result in disciplinary action, which can include discharge. Machine guards and equipment interlocks are designed to prevent contact with moving parts by creating barriers between moving parts and employees' bodies. Machine guards and interlocks are often associated with the lockout process. Although they perform similarly, it is important to note that guards and interlocks are not substitutes for executing effective lockouts. Below are some key points relative to the use of machine guards and interlocks and how they pertain to the lockout policy. Only trained and authorized individuals are permitted to operate Escanaba Mill equipment and vehicles. Everyone must follow all safety lockout procedures in servicing or maintaining equipment to which they are assigned. Questions should be directed to supervisors. Never attempt to operate equipment that has been locked or tagged out by other employees. Make certain that everyone is clear of pinch points and moving parts before starting machinery. Guards are placed on machinery to prevent injury. They must not be removed except as needed for adjustments or repairs, and then they must be replaced immediately. Never reach into moving machinery. Occasionally, lines or vessels that carry or process hazardous chemicals have to be repaired, removed, or otherwise serviced. When this happens, the first point at which a line is separated or a vessel opened is called the initial line breakage. Initial line breakage requires specific safety procedures to ensure that lines are separated without endangering the employees performing the separation. The first step in initial line breakage involves the proper draining, flushing, and isolation of the line to be broken. Chemical information on the material that occupied the line should be readily available. For most materials, this information is already available on the mill computer system, with access available in the area control room. The personal protective equipment required for a line breakage will depend on the material in the line. Crane operators are responsible for all operations under their control. All crane operators must be trained and licensed to operate overhead bridge or gantry cranes. Crane operation requires the complete attention of the operator. Operators must not engage in any activities that will divert their attention while they are involved in moving and controlling loads. Crane operators are responsible for conducting and documenting daily crane inspections at the start of each shift prior to using the cranes. Documentation is achieved by completing and initialing the daily crane inspection checklists. Crane operation signaling. If signaling is required in a crane operation that involves several people, only one person should be authorized to give signals to the crane operator. The operator, however, must respond to a stop signal from anyone. Crane operators' responsibilities. Before moving loads, operators should determine where the loads will be placed and prepare the sites. Operators should make sure that the loads to be lifted are free to move and they are not fastened to other objects or to the floor. Operators should avoid shock loading cranes. Operators should make sure that all workers stand clear of loads while they are being lifted. Operators should make sure that loads are within load limits. Operators should make sure that loads are properly seated in the hooks before lifting. The following activities are prohibited: riding a lifting hook or a load being lifted, working under suspended loads, unless precautions to support the load have been taken and approved by supervisors, placing oneself between moving loads and fixed objects, placing hands, fingers, and other body parts between all possible pinch points of rigging systems, side pulls. Loads should not be moved over areas where other employees are working. Loads should never be left suspended in the air while hoists or cranes are unattended. Only trained and authorized personnel may use aerial and scissor lifts. Both aerial lifts and scissor lifts require the use of fall protection at all times. A fall arrest system or fall restraint system must be used. Before any excavation work takes place, it must be approved by a Verso project engineer or maintenance superintendent. The approval procedure includes initial research to determine any underground line that may pose a hazard to the excavation work. When the excavation will be left unattended for a period of time or overnight, appropriate barricading, lighting, and other considerations must be made. Prior to the excavation taking place, a Verso project engineer or maintenance superintendent familiar with excavation practices must review all of the preparations. Each day, the Verso representative needs to return to the site, ensuring that safe practices are still being followed. No one in the mill, under any circumstance, is to handle, cut, drill, break, or in any way disturb asbestos-containing material, or ACM. Only qualified workers from the mill's paint shop or asbestos abatement contractors may conduct activities on asbestos-containing materials. Asbestos-containing pipes and thermal insulation materials have been labeled with 4-inch red vinyl labels. Contractors that